Welcome to Beyond Discovering. This is the podcast where we go behind the scenes of mineral exploration and try to understand the forces shaping the future of raw materials in Europe and beyond. My name is Thomas Tränkner, and as always I'm joined by my co-host Matthias Fors. Hello Matthias.
Hi Thomas, great to be here again.
Yeah, and today we are tackling a question that has become increasingly strategic for the European Union. Why have critical raw materials become such a big political issue, and what problem is the EU actually trying to solve with the Critical Raw Materials Act? To help us make sense of this, we have invited an expert who has been directly involved with this in shaping this legislation. So our guest today is Erika Ingvald. Welcome, Erika.
Thank you so much, Thomas, and good to see you, Matthias. It's great to be here.
Good to see you too, Erika.
Erika, you work at UNECE, the UN Economic Commission of Europe. Could you explain what that is?
Yeah, so of course, UNECE is one of 5 regional UN economic commissions. So there is economic commissions covering the entire globe, and UNECE have 56 member countries, so not just the EU member states, but also countries like US, Canada, Ukraine, and others. And also, of course, all the EU member states are part of it, but also the candidate countries who want to join the European Union.
Erika, I know you have a long history in the geological field. Please tell the audience a little bit more about EU before we dive into the EU policies.
So I am a geologist by training, as you know, and also a journalist. And I worked for many years at the Geological Survey of Sweden, and mainly especially towards the end, with mineral resources. But I was part of the Swedish delegation that negotiated the Critical Raw Materials Act during the Swedish EU presidency in 2023.
So let me ask you this question. Why is it suddenly everybody talks about the critical raw materials?
I think because political leaders all over the world have understood the importance of access to raw materials, and we don't have enough for everybody. So there is global competition at the same time as there is also global collaboration, because we need global collaboration to solve the climate challenges, for example, which are the main drivers behind the competition for raw materials. But the European Union has been aware of this and its import dependency for a long time. And I think it was in 2008 the first policy discussion started. The first critical raw material list came in 2011. It had 15 materials on it. And today, with the 5th list, I think we're up to 34 materials. So the situation hasn't improved.
So why do we need to list more and more materials?
So that we can prioritize and focus on where we need to start. These materials are essential for the energy transition, for digitalization, for defense, more and more, and for space technologies. So, for example, electric vehicles, renewable energy systems, batteries. None of them would work without the minerals that are on this list, like lithium, graphite, rare earth materials, and so on. And those are also, many of them are also not mined as the main commodity from a mine. They're very often byproducts. So you need to sort of understand how to manage all of this to get what you need of those critical ones.
But it's not only the EU, it's also other countries are doing the same thing. Could you open a bit what other countries are doing?
A lot of countries have their own critical lists, like, so the EU has one, the US, Canada, China, the UK, they all have their own lists. Ukraine, I think I can make a really long list. And those lists are not identical. but they are very similar because everyone needs the same raw materials for the same technologies that we need to reduce the fossil fuel dependence and to decrease the carbon emissions. So we're all after the same things.
So on this list, you said it was 34 materials in the EU list. Are there any tends to surprise people of these?
I think one of the more surprising one is copper, because we have mined copper for thousands of years. We know that the supply is quite diversified, but the problem is that it doesn't feel rare, but the problem is that many of the big copper operations in the world are almost reaching end of life. So they will be closed in a few years, and we don't have any new large discoveries that can directly replace them. So it will become a real challenge in a few years.
I find this really interesting from the early stage exploration perspective, because we have been exploring and mining copper in Sweden and Nordics for a very long time, but now when it comes to critical raw materials, for example lithium, there is no real historical experience here. So both the exploration companies, the personnel within the exploration companies, and the authorities is all starting quite from scratch, and we need to develop the methodologies to explore for these metals.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And it's different raw materials require different skills and methods and geological understanding. But you might also find them in other regions compared to where you have your ongoing mining operations and more intense exploration. So that's a learning curve for a lot of people, actually, for the local and regional authorities and even for the exploration companies, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's true, because also what I find is important is that for the exploration companies is that if you have been working in an area where the landowners, stakeholders, the municipality knows what exploration is all about, and you maybe apply for a new ground in a new area where there isn't the experience neither from the landowners or the municipality, you cannot proceed in the same way, but you actually need to start explaining basic things when it comes to mineral exploration. And this is something that the companies need to be aware of, and not just assume that everyone in Sweden knows what mineral exploration is all about.
That's something really important, because I don't work in Sweden now, but for the years I worked there, we could see that the exploration companies that were really successful, they were really good at liaisons with the local community, with the authorities in question. So they were really good at explaining what they were doing, what it was going to look like forward, and so on. And build trust, super important.
Very important, I agree.
Now we have talked about all the possibilities and what is necessary to do, but what are the main bottlenecks today, would you say, Erika?
I'd say that maybe there are three big ones. And the first one is a long and complex permitting process. The second one, I would say, is access to financing, especially when you have a market that's not, maybe you have a skewed market where different actors are sort of affecting the price. And then the third, lack of knowledge, as Matthias and I have said, both among authorities and general public, and especially in regions without experience, but maybe also in some places with the exploration companies. And the new EU legislation tries to address all three of those issues, particularly for what's called strategic projects, which is a special thing in the Critical Raw Materials Act, something you can apply for.
But Erika, when we look forward, what are your expectations and what do you hope to see in the next 5 years?
I hope that a number of the strategic projects that are already identified will reach production, and that they will reach production with support from authorities, from investors, local communities, that people finally understand how important this is, because if we don't manage this together, we'll be facing serious problems in the energy transition.
That's very important. Erika, thank you very much for participating in this podcast.
Thank you, Thomas. It was a pleasure. And Matthias, to you too. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, Erika.
And you who listen, please subscribe to this podcast so you can get a note when we issue new episodes. So see you next time. Bye bye.